Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the book of Jude. We're going to be reading verses 5 through 11 today. Before we get started, I want to mention a man who was alive when Jesus was born, died when Jesus was just a boy, but a very influential teacher, not only in Judaism but in the Roman world, and that is Philo of Alexandria. Philo of Alexandria was a great Jewish teacher who lived and worked in and around the great library of Alexandria, which is the greatest library the world has ever known. And it burnt down, and so many great works were lost. But I want to mention Philo because he was not the only Jew there at the great center of learning in Alexandria, at the Library of Alexandria. That's where the Greek translation of the Old Testament, that's so important to our New Testament, the Septuagint, was translated. And so there were resident Jewish scholars there in Alexandria. The point that I want to make is that there was an exchange of philosophical ideas, and there was a philosophical dialogue between the best minds in Judaism and the Greek and Roman philosophers. So we should not be surprised that we read writers like Epictetus and then later Marcus Aurelius use language that sounds a lot like the vocabulary we read in 1 John, especially talking about the Logos as being, the wisdom that creates and controls the universe. Philo was saying that. Philo was pointing out that you talk about Logos, well, we do too. Because Genesis 1:1 says God spoke everything into existence. Word is God's creative work and the medium of creation. And there are much more. But I just want us to understand this because there's a dark side to this exchange of ideas as well. Because some of the false teaching that's coming into the church is coming into the church not from Judaizers, but from Greek philosophy, particularly the notion of the dualism between flesh and spirit, that your spirit can be somehow pure while you indulge your flesh. And if spirit is good and flesh is bad, then how could God have come in the flesh? And we see John particularly addressing those two issues, but we see even Paul addressing them as early as the book of 1 Corinthians. And Jude is addressing these issues as well. We already read that yesterday. He said these false teachers are peddling licentiousness, in other words, excess and immorality in the flesh, and then denying our Lord and Master Jesus Christ. John would say people were denying that Jesus had come in the flesh, and it seems that this is what's happening as well. Let's read verses 5 through 11 here. I desire to remind you, though you know all things once for all, that the Lord, after saving a people out of the land of Egypt, subsequently destroyed those who did not believe, and angels who did not keep their own domain, but abandoned their proper abode, he has kept in eternal bonds under darkness for the judgment of the great day, just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them, since they, in the same way as these, indulged in gross immorality, went after strange flesh, and exhibited an example in undergoing the punishment of eternal fire. Yet in the same manner these men, also by dreaming, defile the flesh, reject authority, revile angelic majesties. But Michael, the archangel, when he disputed with the devil and argued about the body of Moses, did not dare pronounce against him a railing judgment, but said, the Lord rebuke you. These men revile the things they don't understand, and the things which they know by instinct, like unreasoning animals, by these things are they destroyed. Woe to them, for they've gone the way of Cain, and for pay they have rushed headlong into the error of Balaam and perished in the rebellion of Korah. Okay, lots of examples, and these examples are examples of judgment. He is calling out their false teaching, but he's not refuting it. He's assuming that his readers know the sinfulness of the things that are happening. What he's doing is threatening them with judgment. If you indulge these men if you have patience with you, you cannot in any way give them any latitude to do what they're doing. God's judgment is going to be swift, severe, and sure, which is what Peter is emphasizing as well. He talks about the flood, as does Peter in 1st and 2nd Peter. And he talks about the Exodus. And he talks about the angels that don't keep their own domain. It's not sure what he's talking about there, but Peter talks about it as well. There's not one single passage. There are hints various places, but those are the two clear passages that say that angels have sinned and are going to be judged and are being kept for judgment. Jesus himself refers to this in Matthew 25, that hell is made for the devil and his angels. And then he talks about Sodom and Gomorrah, and he mentions the sexual licentiousness as well, because that's one of the issues. And then he talks about these are dreamers. Now, he's using this in a negative way. Not that these men have dreams and aspirations, but they are probably trying to share their dreams, either the dreams they've actually had or the dreams they concoct, and are using those authoritatively, that the Lord spoke to me in a dream and he said to do X, Y, and Z, even though the word that's written down clearly says don't do those things. And he says that they reject authority, they defile the flesh. There's this lack of respect that was talked about in 2 Peter as well. And then he talks about Michael the archangel. Michael is mentioned as archangel here in the book of Daniel and in the book of Revelation. In all the Bible, there are only two angelic names were given, and we're given them first in the book of Daniel. Gabriel and Michael as archangel are mentioned in the book of Daniel. Gabriel is also mentioned in the Gospel of Luke as being the messenger that announced the birth of John the Baptist and of Jesus. Michael is mentioned also in the book of Revelation as the archangel, as the one who moves activity he moves history in the service of God. And there's some speculation that the angel of Yahweh that's mentioned multiple times in the Old Testament, the Psalms, and the prophets may be a description of Michael as this special personage among the angelic host. The quote, however, is from an extra-biblical piece of Jewish literature called The Assumption of Moses, which is lost to us. But other people make the same quote and attribute it to the Assumption of Moses. Maybe when the Dead Sea Scrolls are thoroughly investigated, we'll find a fragment of, or maybe a text of, the Assumption of Moses. But this is not in the Bible. This is something that's being quoted from a piece of extra-biblical literature. And we talked about that when we were in 2 Peter, that we should not in any way, get our feathers ruffled when a biblical writer uses an extra-biblical source familiar with his original readers as an example, which is what he's doing. And we also have in verse 10, this notion that we had in 2 Peter, and these are Aristotelian categories. Human beings cannot be trusted to obey their animal impulses. Animals can, but they don't have self-awareness. They don't have a soul the way humans do. We have a higher understanding. We have self-awareness and reasoning, and therefore we have to live by that, not by our animal instincts, not by our limbic brains. And he's making the same point. And then he uses 3 Old Testament examples of swift and sure judgment. Cain, Balaam, who tried to go against God's people for pay, and then the rebellion of Korah. And of course, these are guys that rebelled against Moses, and the earth opened up and swallowed them immediately. Judgment is coming. It's swift, it's sure. Don't you be a part of this in any way, or you'll be caught up in the judgment as well. Well, almost 10 good minutes today. I'm sorry. Maybe you can take tomorrow off. We'll pick up with verse 12 next time. Thank you.